How, for example, is the response to the COVID-19 pandemic different than, for example, the response to the flu pandemic as we experience it today?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Julie. There are some commonalities with flu and COVID, and there certainly are some differences. So if we think about COVID, and we're still learning a lot about it and the effects it can have, and these effects include long-term effects. You may have heard the term long COVID or long haulers. And we are learning that there are some people, even some people who've had mild infection, who do go on to develop long-lasting symptoms. And so we are trying to get a sense of how often that occurs, what is the impact of the ongoing symptoms, how does that impact people's quality of life. One of the common symptoms that we hear about is brain fog, where people have some challenges with concentration, with remembering things. There are many people who have other symptoms that could include some shortness of breath, variety of exercise intolerance, variety of other things. That is less common with influenza. There can be some complications from influenza, particularly if people have chronic conditions, heart, lung conditions. Influenza can sometimes make it worse. But this entity that we're calling long COVID, it seems to be really more associated with COVID. They're definitely, it seems to be more distinct. They're going back though to commonalities. Both of these, as you know, are respiratory illnesses, and many of the signs and symptoms are familiar, such as fever, cough, body aches, shortness of breath. And that is why we recommend testing, because that's really the only way you're going to know whether it's COVID, whether it is flu, whether it's a variety of other respiratory viruses that can cause similar symptoms. And the reason why it's important to know is because the treatment is different. There are antivirals for influenza that work for influenza, but they don't work for COVID. And certainly we are concerned about people with COVID not being out in the community and spreading infection. And so we have recommendations around quarantine for contacts of people with COVID. We don't have that for influenza, but we do know that the mitigation measures that we use for COVID, in addition to keeping sick people home, and that's really important for both COVID and influenza, that they're not out and spreading in the community, but things like masking, good hand washing, they actually have a big impact on influenza as well as COVID. And we saw very little influenza last year during what would normally be influenza season. Some other ways that they're a little different is that COVID is thought to be a lot more contagious than influenza. And even with the mitigation measures that we had in place, we did still have cases of COVID, even though there were many fewer cases of influenza. We had some, but very, very few. And we also think that COVID may be contagious for a longer period of time in a person than influenza. And the time it takes between exposure to influenza and developing influenza and exposure to COVID and developing COVID is also a little different. Between exposure to influenza and developing symptoms is usually 1 to 4 days, whereas for COVID, it's 2 to 14 days with an average of 5 days.
Those are some really helpful differences to keep in mind as we're thinking about the spread of both of those things that we're dealing with, and some of the proactive ways that people can work to prevent both COVID and the flu, and certainly some benefits of the additional measures that we've taken on.
One other piece I'd want to add, Julie, and we'll be talking about this more in a few minutes, is that there are vaccines available for both. And those are great prevention measures. So we do want to remind people about vaccine.